and keep your microphone muted, or you may choose to excuse yourself from the meeting. Other important notes: your microphone and webcam are automatically disabled upon entering the meeting. The meeting will be open to questions and answers at the end of the formal presentation. And please take time to respond to our survey. Your feedback is important. So for today's agenda, we will begin with welcome and introductions. We'll go over Zoom directions. We will have an MBTA presentation on Orange Line platform gaps. We'll begin with Laura Brailsford from System-Wide Accessibility. We will then have Dan Carroll, who's the manager of the Office of Chief Engineer, and Glenda Campbell, the Senior Coordinator of Accessibility Monitoring Program at System-Wide Accessibility. Then we will have a feedback session and then closing remarks. Our ASL interpreters today are Janice Evans and Denise Martinez. To view their video, find the interpreter's video in the gallery. In the top right corner of the interpreter's video, click the ellipses, then click the pin video option. This will keep the interpreter's video on your screen. Our CART captioner tonight is Denise Gracia. To view the closed captioning, click closed caption with the CC icon. A tip is to click and drag the closed captioning to move its positioning in the meeting window. To adjust the caption size, click the upward arrow next to Start Video / Stop Video. Click Video Settings, then Accessibility. Move the slider to adjust the caption size. If you have a technical question about Zoom or the features of this meeting, please use the chat function. Our technical assistant will attempt to troubleshoot your problem and get back to you. This meeting's topic discussion is platform gaps on MBTA's Orange Line. When called upon, please introduce yourself briefly, keep your response limited to 2 to 3 minutes, and focus on an example related to the discussion topic. Now we will have our MBTA update regarding the platform gaps on the Orange Line, and we will begin with Laura Brailsford.
Thanks so much, Kat. Good afternoon, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Laura Brailsford, and I work as the Assistant General Manager at the MBTA's Department of System-Wide Accessibility. We have a presentation for you today that's going to focus really on three topics related to platform gaps. I'm going to start off by sharing some backgrounds on platform gaps and the MBTA's approach over the years to minimizing gaps. Dan Carroll, my colleague from the Office of the Chief Engineer, is going to provide you some information on a comprehensive audit that was just completed regarding gaps on the Orange Line. I'll then share some background on our Bridgeplate program, which is available for anybody who may need some assistance navigating over and across gaps in the system. And then Glenda Campbell from my team will be sharing a bit about how we monitor the success of the Bridgeplate program to make sure that it is readily available for all riders. All right, next slide. So to get us started, for those that may not have a lot of familiarity with this afternoon's topic, I just wanted to start with some very general backgrounds regarding what are we talking about when we talk about platform gaps. There are really two types of platform gaps. The first is what we call the horizontal gap, and that is the horizontal distance between the edge of the platform, the station platform, and the edge of the train car. And then we have a vertical gap, and that is the vertical distance between the top of the platform, the station platform, and the car floor, which typically, if there is a vertical gap, that means it will be either a step up or step down into or off of the platform. And just on the screen there is a photo showing from inside of a subway car looking out onto a platform, and you can see the detectable warning panel. There appears to be a vertical step up onto the platform. All right, with respect to design requirements and platform gaps, so the standards are slightly different when you look at the federal and state requirements. At the federal level, the DOT and FTA requirements are that when you are in a scenario where you have new vehicles and new stations, so generally that means stations built after 1990, the requirement is the gaps be no wider than 3 inches and no greater in vertical distance than 5/8 of an inch. But when you have a situation where you have new vehicles and stations that predated the ADA, predated 1990, the gaps should be no wider than 3 inches, but can be up to 1.5 inches in vertical distance and still be considered compliant. At the state level, so the regulations overseen by the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board, it's slightly different. Like, it's still a 3-inch maximum horizontal gap, but they require that vertical gaps be no greater than a 1/2 inch. However, it's worth noting that under the MAB regulations, they do state that if it's essentially technically infeasible to get the vertical gaps within that requirement, that bridge plates are an appropriate solution for mitigating the gap. Okay, so what are some of the causes that result in different gaps in different portions of our system? So there's a lot of factors that play into whether or not platform gaps exist. So the first and really the most important is the spatial relationship between the tracks, center line of the tracks, and the platform edge. If the center line of the tracks and the platform edge are aligned correctly, gaps will generally be within the minimum design requirement standards. So less than 3 inches wide, and ideally with no vertical difference at all. But if there is if the relationship with the tracks and platform edge are out of line, gaps will result. Other factors that can affect the gaps are if there's a curve in the platform, you're likely to see not only wider gaps in certain spots, but also an increase in vertical gaps. The condition and age of vehicles certainly is a factor, and the weight within the vehicles is another factor. Next slide, please. So, as many of you likely know, platform gaps are not a new challenge for the MBTA and for our riders. They are very common in legacy systems and older transit systems. They were such a significant concern in the early 2000s that they were included as a key component of the Daniels-Feingold settlement in 2006. Largely because of that fact, between 2009 and 2011, our track engineers spent a significant amount of time on a major initiative to adjust the track beds wherever feasible, and to install what we call rub rail wherever possible to minimize both the horizontal and vertical gaps. However, due to structural limitations in various parts of our system, noticeable gaps still remained even after all of this work. So most notably, many of us are familiar with the vertical gap at Charles MGH, which is depicted in the photo on the right here. And similarly, intermittent vertical gaps have continued to be a challenge throughout the Southwest Corridor and the Orange Line. So generally sort of south of Back Bay, vertical gaps intermittently have posed a challenge even after all that work was completed. But since 2011, periodic surveys of the relationships between the tracks and the platforms continued when feasible adjustments continued to be made. And anytime we took on a meaningful station upgrade, the track beds and platforms were completely rebuilt to make sure we ended up with horizontal gaps that were within 3 inches and virtually no vertical gaps. Next slide. However, over the last year, we have observed an increase in gaps on the Orange Line, particularly related to the new cars at certain platforms. These observations corresponded with an increase in complaints and concerns raised by riders. So we began working with our Maintenance of Way colleagues and our Office of the Chief Engineer to figure out how we could get a better understanding of what was going on and what we could do about it. Next slide. And so at this point, I want to introduce Dan Carroll, who's a manager within our Chief Engineer's office, who helped get us started with a close examination of the status of gaps on the Orange Line. Dan?
Thanks, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so as Laura mentioned, my name is Dan Carroll. I'm the manager of facilities in the OCE, although manager of OCE sounds like a much more prestigious title. But this project came to us this past spring with a goal of collecting measurements for every door to platform location on the Orange Line, trying to identify areas of non-compliance and proposing actions for remediation. In addition to those measurements, we will field measure top of rail to platform heights and center line of rail to platform widths for baseline data. And that's to determine if those areas, the assets at those areas are within their design tolerance. This will help us understand if we're looking at a vehicle, track, or platform issue that is out of compliance. The image here is, I believe this is Green Street looking northbound on the northbound platform. And this is just a couple of our surveyors during our field work a couple weeks back. Next slide, please. So, you can go back to the methodology slide. Yeah, so I'll talk through this here, our methodology a little bit, and the image, and the image kind of describes what our methodology was. So initially, when this came to us, we were just met by the challenge of how do we conduct these measurements at every door, at every single platform location, and do it in a way that doesn't interrupt service. And also, how do we do it in a way that simulates a weighted train? Because that is one of the assets that we want to consider here is, are the vehicles functioning correctly? Previous efforts had conducted measurements at single stations or during non-revenue service, but we wanted to get something that was a little bit more comprehensive, and we decided that the way to gather the most comprehensive data would be to have a field engineer at each train door and take a measurement at every single stop while riding the train during revenue service. We would go from Forest Hills northbound to Oak Grove, and then from Oak Grove southbound to Forest Hills riding the same train. And then at Forest Hills, we would then switch trains, and we did this for several days. So we had 18 field surveyors, which is what is being shown on this image here. And I believe this is Mass Ave on the northbound platform looking southbound. Next slide, please. So our process, the Orange Line typically runs 8 to 10 train sets that are active during a weekday. We have more than 10 train sets, but that's just what they have in rotation at a given time. So we felt as a project goal, if we could get a minimum of 10 train sets for data, then that would give us a broad enough sample size. So as mentioned previously, we had a surveyor capturing measurements at each door for each platform for every station on the Orange Line. We did this over the course of a single week. We completed measurements on 2 train sets a day, north and south. And we did this midday service, so 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we were probably at about 50% capacity for a vehicle. Some of them later in the day, as you got towards the end of school, would be a little bit higher volume. And then the morning ones were usually a little bit lower volume. Next slide, please. So just a couple of photos here that I wanted to show and describe. The first one is just the measurement process itself. So the stick has is essentially a kind of a T-square ruler. It takes a horizontal measurement, and then it takes a vertical measurement both up and down. The one that we are looking at is a gap that I would say is the train is running lower than the platform. So this is one that's probably in the central tunnel. The second image is in the middle here, is showing a unique condition that unfortunately we saw a couple. This was by far the most drastic. This is Sullivan Station northbound at the head end of the vehicle. So we have a couple of scenarios where we had installed rub rail, and in this one particularly, it terminates in the middle of the door opening. So you already have a large gap even with the rub rail, and then without the rub rail, you know that gap adds another 3 inches. We couldn't pick a measurement using the tool, so we had to get a tape measure out. Being in the field and seeing these firsthand, you know, these are the things that can kind of get called right into maintenance to go out and address. And we have some deteriorated rub rail throughout the system as well, and that kind of takes me into the next picture here, which you can see is a rub rail condition that is severely warped. This is kind of a unique condition. This is really the only location that we found it, but it just kind of details for us that we have, you know, material issues to work with, and this looks like it maybe was a temperature issue that caused this condition. But again, something that has to be addressed, and just wanted to show some of the challenges that we're working with. So next slide, please. So from our time out there, some of the early findings. So we don't have comprehensive data yet. We have a few early findings. Those are, I would say, from my own direct involvement in the survey. I did have the opportunity to join the engineers and take measurements, and then speaking with some of the other surveyors. So I think there's some familiarity on this call that the Southwest Corridor consistently runs high. The trains run higher than the platform. And we saw that in our measurements, and we saw fairly consistent horizontal gaps there as well that were out of compliance. Within the central tunnel, that would be from Tufts to North Station, we saw generally better vertical and horizontal gaps, but not consistently within compliance. And then the newer platforms, Assembly is a newer station, newer to us. It's, I think, 9 years old now, and Oak Grove, I think that platform is 7 or 8 years old. Both very good vertical and horizontal gaps. What that shows us is that we're probably looking at an infrastructure issue here and not necessarily a vehicle issue. We don't know that for sure yet. The data will have to back that up, but that's kind of what our early thought is. So next steps, we are still developing and compiling this data. We expect to have a report from our consulting engineer in early December. And that will be a draft report to us. And then internally, we've begun some discussions on what we have for potential solutions. So things like installing some rub rail, what kind of modifications can we make to portions of platform or track, which aren't really as straightforward as we might think they are, and is there any flexibility to make modifications to train cars? And those are things that we're going to continue to look at going forward. And I believe that is it for my slides. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Dan. All right, next, it's hard to have a conversation about platform gaps without talking about our mobile bridge plate program, because although certainly our goal is to make sure that we end up with a system with no noticeable gaps, the reality is that that's not the case at all platforms today, and that some of these gaps pose a real significant barrier to getting on and off vehicles. So that's why we have a robust mobile bridge plate program in practice. And for those that may not be aware of the programs or how it works, we just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking through this. So we have mobile bridge plates located at all heavy rail stations. That is our red, orange, and blue lines. We generally have 2 mobile bridge plates attached to each platform. These bridge plates are available to any rider upon request. Typically, they are most requested by those of us that use wheeled mobility, but they are available for anyone to use upon request. Requests can be made really to any MBTA employee working in the station. So our station agents, trans ambassadors, CSAs, or station officials. A request can also always be made directly to the motor person driving a train. If a staff member is not readily available, riders can always access one of our OCC dispatchers by using a call box in a station. When that happens, they will radio ahead to, they will radio the motor person of the next approaching subway train and let them know that they will need to be prepared to get off the train and assist someone using a bridge plate. And the photo on the screen shows one of our MBTA station agents deploying a mobile bridge plate on an Orange Line vehicle. All right, I just wanted to take the opportunity here to show you a piece of a brand new training web video we just developed in the last couple of months. This training video is so new, it has not yet been dropped in to the motor person's recertification course. But we wanted you to get a chance to take a look at it. It does a nice job of providing an overview of the bridge plate program or process. We're only going to show half of it here. But if you're interested in seeing more, just let us know after the meeting.
I'm just going to take this down for 1 second, Laura, and then play it.
Mobile bridge plate deployment procedure. Mobile bridge plates are installed on platforms at all accessible red, orange, and Blue Line stations to provide customers with the means to safely navigate vertical and/or horizontal gaps between a station platform and a heavy rail car. Bridge plates are typically located at each end of the platform and in most customer assistance areas and can be identified by blue and white signage depicting a wheelchair user on a ramp. Customers who use a wheeled mobility device are the most likely to rely on a bridge plate to board or alight the train. However, any customer, including ambulatory customers and customers with non-apparent disabilities, have the right to use a bridge plate. Motor persons, customer service agents, transit ambassadors, and station officials are responsible for deploying bridge plates for customers upon their request. Customers have the option to request a bridge plate by speaking directly to an employee or by contacting the OCC using a station call box. Employees must be sure that the requested assistance is provided in a safe and timely manner so that the customer can board the first available train. Proper technique for bridge plate deployment when boarding a customer. If you receive a request for a bridge plate, discreetly ask the customer to tell you their direction of travel and their destination station. You should then notify the OCC dispatcher that a bridge plate has been requested so that assistance can be coordinated. Tell the OCC dispatcher the customer's boarding station, direction of travel, and destination station. If you are unable to personally assist the customer with the bridge plate for any reason, immediately notify the OCC dispatcher so arrangements can be made for another employee to provide assistance. You are still responsible for ensuring the customer is accommodated. All communications with the OCC dispatcher, as well as with the customer, should be made discreetly. This is to ensure that you don't attract unwanted attention toward the customer, nor reveal the customer's personal travel plans to other customers. Once the OCC dispatcher has been notified, locate and unlock the bridge plate using your P key and carry it to whichever train car the customer wishes to board. Always allow a customer to board the car of their choosing, as they may find that one car accommodates their needs better than another. Place the bridge plate on the platform with the metal spacer on the underside of the bridge plate pointed downward. Slowly move the plate towards the train so that the spacer enters the gap. The spacer will prevent the bridge plate from moving. If the train floor is higher or lower than the platform, place the short, flat edge of the bridge plate on the higher side of the gap. If the train is higher than the platform, the short, flat edge should be placed on the train floor. Before the customer boards, always check the bridge plate to make sure there is no movement. After the customer has boarded, notify the OCC dispatcher of the train's car number and confirm their direction of travel, as well as their boarding and destination stations.
Portable 440 Control. I'm at Forest Hills. I have a customer requesting a bridge plate. The customer will be getting on the second car at Forest Hills and getting off at Downtown Crossing.
Make sure the OCC dispatcher acknowledges the messages. If you are unable to connect with the OCC dispatcher, share this information directly with the train motor person. Immediately return the bridge plate to its designated location and secure it properly. Under no circumstances should the bridge plate be removed from the station where it is stored. For example,
All right, thanks, Rob. I do want to take the opportunity here to especially thanks Rob Sampson from System-Wide Accessibility from our team for all the work that went into the overseeing of the making of the video. But also a big shout out to Jerry Boyd and Andy Foreman, who were featured prominently in the video. Thank you guys for your help with this. All right, so, really quickly, I also just wanted to briefly mention, in addition to our mobile bridge plate program, there is another feature on our system that was designed to help navigate platform gaps. And that is a feature we call the gap mitigation device or gap filler. So this is a feature that is available on the first car. So that's the car closest to the motor person of all of our new red and orange line cars. The gap mitigation device is designed specifically to help with horizontal gaps, and you'll see what I mean in a second. It was not designed to address vertical gaps. It is not compatible with all of our platforms today, given the fact that some of our platforms at the far end of the platforms have noticeable vertical gaps that makes the gap mitigation device not function properly. We also, this is not a feature we have heavily advertised to riders, largely because we are still working on making some adjustments to the sequencing of the system, specifically the order in which someone makes a request by pressing a button on the train, the way that request goes to the motor person, the way the gap mitigation is deployed, and then the way the doors are open. We're working on streamlining that a little bit. So until that occurs, we have held off on heavily publicizing this feature. But it does exist. Again, we know some writers have found it helpful, so we wanted to talk about that a little bit today. And the photo on the screen is actually a photo of a wheelchair user on one of our new trains pressing a gap mitigation device button with the doors of the train open. All right, and here's just a very quick video clip showing what, from sort of a bird's eye view, what the gap filler looks like when it's deploying. All right, and next I'm gonna turn it over to Glenda Campbell from our team, who's gonna talk about how we leverage our monitoring program to make sure that the Bridge Plate program is working as intended. Glenda?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Glenda Campbell. I work at the Department of SWA as the Senior Program Coordinator of the Internal Access Monitoring Program. I am here today to introduce you to the program and some of the work that we do related to platform monitoring. So first and foremost, the mission of the work that we do is to internally evaluate the T's accessibility compliance. And we can achieve this goal through a secret shopper program composed of trained individuals who ride the system in pairs. And our monitors are divided into two categories. There is a tester monitor, a person with a disability that tests the system. And there is an observer monitor, who is an individual that rides the MBTA system with the tester to observe, record data, and serve as a witness for any unfolding events. Monitors are assigned to test a variety of T modes like buses, subways, commuter rails, ferries, and contracted bus shuttles. On each mode, they are evaluating a variety of accessibility features and services available to the public. Around 1,500 trips may be conducted in a year on all of the modes the transit offers that is offered by the T, except for the ride. And related to the presentation, some of the accessibility features and services that we monitor are mobile bridge plate requests. Next slide, please. So how do we evaluate a bridge plate request? We are looking out for the following. Was there an employee at the station? If so, did the monitor end up missing any trains while waiting for them to deploy the bridge plate? If no employee was readily available at the station and the monitor used a call box to make a request, Did the monitor end up missing any trains while waiting for the bridge plate assistance? What type of employee deployed the bridge plate? Was someone ready to provide assistance at the monitor's destination station? And finally, what type of employee deployed the bridge plate at the monitor's destination station? Next slide, please. Among the recent findings from the data collected by the monitors between April and June of this year, the percentage of time an employee was present at the boarding station was 66%. The percentage of time a bridge plate was provided in time to board the next approaching train was 93%, with the remaining 7% of the monitors boarding the second train set. If no employee was present at the boarding station and the monitor used a call box, the percentage of time when a bridge plate was provided in time to board the next approaching train was 100%. And finally, the percentage of time an employee was waiting at the destination station to provide assistance was 100%. Next slide, please. So our data shows that for the most part, bridge plate requests are being fulfilled at a favorable rate, but what happens if something goes wrong? All accessibility rule violations are investigated by area supervisors, and a thorough investigation is conducted. Should the investigation determine that there was a failure to honor a bridge plate request, there are clear penalties associated, and these may involve the employee receiving discipline and/or retraining. And on a broader lens, SWA meets regularly with rail leadership to discuss monitoring trends and ways to improve service for our riders with disabilities. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. I will now be handing things over to Laura, who can provide more information that may be helpful to you. Thank you all so much and have a good afternoon.
Linda, thanks so much. All right, just to wrap things up here, because I know we are eager to get to the feedback portion of today. But we do want to wrap up by just reminding everyone that if you experience a problem either with gaps on our subway system or really any challenge using any one of our services, we really do want to hear from you so we can find out what happened and take appropriate action. The best way to do that is by filing a complaint or commendation by calling 617-222-3200 or by going to our websites and filing a feedback form. If you go to mbta.com and click on support at the top of the page, you will be brought to that feedback form. Or you can always tweet at us by tweeting at MBTA with details of your feedback. To learn more about the platform gaps and other initiatives underway, check out mbta.com/accessibility, particularly our access guides, which talk through key features we have on each mode. You can also sign up for our monthly SWA newsletter by going to mbta.com/SWA sign up. And of course, we'd love to see you at our next public meeting. I believe we've got another RTAG meeting in December, which you'll hear about at the end of today. We also have a semi-annual settlement update coming up on December 6th at 5:30. That will be a virtual meeting. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Kat now to facilitate the feedback session. Before I do that, though, I just wanted to tee up some questions. I mean, certainly we are here today to hear really any and all feedback you have about platform gaps on our Orange Line. But some of the questions on the screen are questions that your thoughts would be genuinely helpful to us as we work to make improvements and better share information with riders. So some examples of thoughts we'd love to hear from you on is sort of what has been your experience with platform gaps on the Orange Line? or elsewhere on the system. Have you had experience using a portable or mobile bridge plate? Have you had experience using the new gap mitigation device? And what would be the most effective ways of raising awareness among riders regarding bridge plate availability? Okay, so from here, I'm gonna turn it over to Kat, and my team and I will be here to listen to feedback and answer any questions we can. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Laura. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right. So if you have questions or comments for system-wide accessibility, to indicate that you have a question, please use Zoom's raise hand feature located at the bottom of the screen. When you raise your hand, it alerts the moderator that you'd like to speak. The moderator will unmute attendees to ask questions in the order that they raise their hands.
And I'm not able to use my Zoom feature because as I've told you, Pat.
Okay, no worries. I will call on you when we get to that part of the presentation. To speak, click reactions, then raise hand. To use your keyboard, you can click the Alt and Y key. And if you're calling in, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Next slide, please. Oh, we'll go back to the last slide. All right. So I am going to start with Ellie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Ellie Vargas, and I recently used Forest Hill, and there was no platform, there was no bridge plate anywhere on either side, and I have to go upstairs to notify a person that I needed help. Luckily enough, the driver was switching, or the motor, whatever the person is to drive the train. They were switching. I got his attention. He's like, "Come with me." Went to the front, and he put that new device out. It was kind of creepy, but you know, he said it was safe, so I went on it, and that's how I went on the platform. I'm glad that they're doing programs where they're having a tester that's a mobility device user and having someone observe. I would throw my hat and volunteer, but you guys have that down pat. Keep on with the great upgrades. And I still have some concerns on the blue and green line, but it seems like you guys are doing a decent job. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Trung, you're next.
My input, thank you very much, by the way. I'll follow Ellie's lead. This is Trung in Canton. My experience has been at Forest Hills as well. I use an Ambilitrack 84 walking cane. The assistance was fantastic. I guess my focus is more on the awareness and how we get more awareness out there. Maybe if we could pipe in to the train sets messages of what's available and how to get that assistance, and along those lines, I mean, some of those gaps. I'm glad you had the pictures of them, and I do appreciate all the work that's being done. I think this is great, and I know there was a gap at once. I mean, it felt like it was like a duck pin bowling alley. It was so wide. So I really do appreciate the work that's being done here. So my only suggestion is, if we're doing overhead announcements, maybe we get a celebrity or a distinctive voice, you know, so it's not just like somebody that you're not going to, you know, somebody that wants to donate their time, obviously, but so that people will hear it and not just pass it off. I know Bruce Springsteen would be great, but we're not going to get Bruce Springsteen. Maybe we get a local celebrity, like a personality, I don't know, Kirk Minahan, for example, or some other sports person or a singer. That's all I got. But thank you very much. I appreciate the work.
Thank you so much, Trung. Colleen, you are next.
Thank you, Kat and Laura and everybody for the very informative presentation. I live in Jamaica Plain and Green Street is my station, as I think I've shared with this group before. I wasn't surprised. I have experienced the vertical and horizontal gaps daily, actually, at this point. So wasn't surprised to hear that they exist and are, like the measurements showed, like 3 to 4 inches. Wasn't surprised to hear that oftentimes a station employee is not readily available to request the mobile bridge plates. That's happened to me more times than I can count, where I couldn't find the employee to get the bridge plate to get on the first train that came. But I usually did get on the second train. I guess I always got on the second train, but you know, that's 17 minutes or so later. My biggest, and I also have experience using the automatic or whatever, the powered bridge plate. I have a lot of positive experience, way more positive experience using the powered bridge plate than I have using the metal portable manual bridge plates. That said, I had my first not so positive experience because if both doors don't open on the first car, I can't use the powered bridge plate anymore, and it creates a problem. My biggest thing I want to share is there's no rider direction to this entire system. We are very dependent on the MBTA, and I know in your training, we're not supposed to be called out, but we are. Everybody knows that the train is delayed because somebody with a disability is trying to board. And that was never the case just a few years ago. And I know that nobody at System-Wide Accessibility wants it to be that way, but it is that way. And just as a commuter, 9 to 5 every day, it's humiliating because it's not easy to navigate the gaps and use a power chair. So a lot of awareness, and thank you for asking that, like what awareness can be done so that people with disabilities aren't feeling the harm that they are, or at least I am as a person with disability right now. I think that more public awareness to the entire public needs to be done that these gaps exist. I think all the riders deserve to know that now these gaps are bigger, and that is why sometimes the trains are delayed, because people with disabilities need to wait for bridge plates. Thank you for listening to the feedback and having these meetings and doing what you do. That's it.
Thank you, Colleen. Dawn, I know your raise hand feature does not work. Would you like to go next?
Yes, one, I'd like to vote for Colleen to be that celebrity voice to talk up the bridge plate. And two, which is one, the bridge plate issue on the Orange Line is like the Mount Everest of or the platform gaps, or compared to like the Mount Everest of the transit system. And to tell you the truth, I don't always trust the transit ambassadors, because twice, one when I requested the bridge plate at Charles, when I boarded at Central, I didn't need it. The bridge plate wasn't there at Charles because the transit ambassador neglected to call OCC. And then there was another time where I had a board at Park Street, and the ambassador was walking towards my car with the bridge plate, but the operator started to close the door. And maybe that the T should have figured out the gap mitigation figure before putting these cars in service, and also having more assistance on every car, those assistance buttons, not on just some cars, but every car. If we need assistance, we don't have time to wait for an employee, etc. Having them on every car would be actually very important for us. Because every time a train is waiting for a bridge plate for us, there's some passengers that like to take it out on those with disabilities because we're holding up the train for them.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Dawn. And just for everyone, I'm sure system-wide accessibility.
And I was done, but maybe you should have actually, well, whatever, doesn't matter.
Thank you for sharing. I was just going to say, I'm sure system-wide accessibility would appreciate folks sending in complaints whenever that happens with transit ambassadors or operators as well. Susie, you're next. Oh, sorry, Laura, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to take the opportunity to say sort of specific to the concern, a very understandable anxiety that you may need a bridge plate when you're exiting the train, and what to do if somebody does not show up. So as Glenda mentioned, this is something we look at really closely on the monitoring program. You know, is assistance provided on your at your destination station? And if we find that that is not the case, a number of things happen in that investigation to figure out where the breakdown in communication was, and there's some very meaningful actions that are taken if it's found that someone made a mistake in that process. But one thing that is noteworthy is particularly on our new vehicles. So all of the cars on the Orange Line are new, and we have at least 2 new train sets on the Red Line that are running. On these vehicles, there are public information intercoms much more accessibly located near all accessible seating areas and near the doors, that if you arrive at your destination and either no one is there to assist you, or very unexpectedly you encounter a gap that you were not planning to have to deal with, you can use that intercom to contact the motor person on your train, and they are required to acknowledge and respond to any intercom requests before they essentially close the doors and move on to the next train. And so they will be on the hook for helping you off there. So again, so on those new vehicles, one big improvement in the design is there's a lot more accessible intercoms for everybody to be able to access the motor person. Just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Go ahead, Susie.
Thanks, Laura. And thanks, Kat. I don't use a wheelchair, but the other day I was trying to sort of back out of the Orange Line due to being at a stop that wasn't my own, and due to the sheer number of people, I wasn't able to find a seat. So the need to walk out the door and go stand by the door and let other people exit. And as I was backing out, my foot slipped through the gap, and I was kind of I panicked, and there were a couple of people that helped me, and I was really afraid that I'd lose my shoe, my brand new shoes. But the one shoe, I was afraid that I'd lose it down the pit. And I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that I lost something in the pit. I lost my cane in the pit one time. That was crazy. So I mean, the gap is a problem for people even with who are ambulatory or whatever. It's just, it can be a real challenge. And so it was kind of unnerving when before I saw that the drivers, the engineer saw me and was gonna sort of wait for that to before they closed the door and got underway. I mean, that would have been crazy. Anyway, my commutes recently have been incredibly challenging with long delays and long waits, and and all sorts of things. So, yeah, the fixture can be as daunting as waiting for a pickup for the ride. I mean, it can be incredibly slow to get to work. Anyway.
Thank you, Susie, thanks for sharing. Joanne Daniels Feingold, you're next. And you're muted.
Sorry about that. Hi, Kat.
Hi.
I work in Jamaica Plain on Saturdays. It's a 15-mile ride from my home in Braintree, but I love my customers and that's why I do it. However, because of lots of reasons, there's one Saturday I got to Park Street Green Line. They said there's no service from Park Street going anywhere. So I had to take the Orange Line into Forest Hills, and then I came back on the 39. I wasn't crazy about the gap. It was it was an older train, but there was still a decent gap getting on. But I just like shrugged my shoulders. There were no person. Oddly enough, for a day when there was nobody moving anything down the hall and at Park Street going down to Downtown Crossing on the Orange Line, there was nobody down there either. So there was no one to ask for a bridge plate. I saw it wasn't that bad, so I backed on. I don't think the first car mobile plate would work for me. I pick my train cars for where the elevator is on my exit deliberately. But anyway, so I got on the train. When I got to Forest Hills, end of the line, no problem, I thought. I pressed the on car button to notify somebody that somebody wanted to get out. No one came. So the train is just like basically in park, nobody's going. So I'm like, and I don't see anybody on this huge platform that I can call out to. I stuck my legs on the platform and kept my butt in the train. Sure enough, somebody came along. They were already in, for some reason, the motor person's car and started to close the doors. And when the guy came down, oh, we're trying to move the train out. And I'm trying to get out of the train. So, okay, finally, somebody came on. He went and got the bridge plate and said, why didn't OCC? I said, there was nobody down at Downtown Crossing when I got on the train. So this is the kind of thing that happens. On the way back, that was hell day. I told Jennifer about it. She knows. On the way back, again, I did find somebody at Forest Hills, said, I'm going to Downtown Crossing, please have somebody there. We pulled into the trains, we pulled into Downtown Crossing. There was nobody at the car where I was. Eventually, one of the customer service people came along, one of the red shirts, and he had a bridge plate in his hand that didn't have the handle in the middle. I said, I'm not using that. I want you to get one here that is appropriate, that's not broken. You want me to go all the way back and get another bridge plate? Yes, I want one that works. I don't want to get hurt. And I want to see an inspector. Well, the inspector came, and so did the supervisor for this particular person in the vendor program. And the inspector had said to me, we knew it had been on the platform for more than a day. They knew it was there. And for some reason, this guy went for it. It's like, I'm not slipping. At that point, too, I was on a new train, and the gap was wide enough so you could have lost a toddler down. It was a vertical and a horizontal gap that was big enough so that a couple of legs could have gone down there if they were small enough. There were multiple issues, and I was between that and after that having to deal with Yankee shuttles on my way home to Braintree. I just pretty much have had it a lot of the time on Saturdays when I have to commute. But it's like, this shouldn't be this way. There shouldn't be equipment that's not usable on the platforms. There shouldn't be people with bad attitudes about getting good equipment to you. This shouldn't be. There shouldn't be people who are in management who have knowledge of broken equipment and don't do anything about it. I was so disappointed. Somebody who's been so closely aligned with things that are happening well on the And this was like beyond, I can't believe this is happening, but it was. That being said, okay, that day is over with, that problem's been done with, but who knows when the next one is going to come? I know that there are certain, one of the things that's important if you're a regular commuter, and Colleen and anybody else who has to do this will tell you that, you have to know the territory. You have to know which platforms you know are going to have a vertical gap, like at Quincy Center southbound. I can't get out of a train there anymore. Haven't been able to for a couple of years. And there are other places where you know that the gap is going to be there, so you have to prepare for it, or just not use that platform, not use that station. We know we're the ones who are out there, but what about the people who really should be starting to use the fixed route services? We need to have better communication with the public. We really do. I've been saying this for what, 25 years? There has to be a better way that we can let people know this exists. This is here for your help. You can use this. There are places that you haven't even mentioned on the Green Line where the sliding ramp coming out doesn't come out evenly with the you can't deploy them on the westbound side North Station. Depending on where the train parks, some of those ramps can't come out. They run into the side of the platform and they cannot be deployed. Nobody even says anything about that, and it happens in more than one station.
Thank you, Joanne, for sharing.
That's it. And I know I should be better about making complaints. When I have days like where it's like one thing after another, I just get home and want to flush it. But anyway, that's just it. I will go. Bye. Have a good.
Thank you,
meeting.
Joanne. Jerry, you're next.
Hi, thank you for recognizing me, and thank you to SWA for their presentations today, and thanks too for everybody that's speaking up. One thing that I'd like to mention that I think needs better education too is when and where the transit ambassadors are staffing these stations. I too live on the southwest corridor side. Forest Hills is the station that I begin my commute most of the time. And one time recently when I went to Forest Hills, I looked for a transit ambassador, and luckily it was during a time where someone was in the customer service booth, and that person said, there are no transit ambassadors here. I'm it. I'm one of the last, customer service agents employed by the T. So that person came down the elevator with me and made sure that the bridge plate was deployed. She couldn't even do it herself because she had an injury. So she had a colleague help her with the bridge plate. But again, if we want to publicize these features, these programs, we need to make sure that all the potential users know how to how best to get the assistance that they need. And I'm also concerned, if I was to ring the call box in the car, in one of the new cars, and I get to a station and I notice that there's a vertical gap. I'm concerned with how long it would take between me ringing that call box and getting a response. I'm concerned that there wouldn't be enough time I'm concerned that the train would start moving before I could exit. Maybe that's an unfounded concern, but it is a concern that I have. So.
Thanks, Jerry. Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, if I can Jerry, just speak to that last concern, because I think it's certainly understandable why anyone would be concerned about doors closing prematurely and taking off before you've had a chance to exit the train. But I will say, in terms of motor person's responsibilities, if they receive an alert that a passenger has pressed the intercom, the assistance intercom, they are required to not move that train until all of those intercom requests have been cleared, because those request buttons are, not just there for bridge plates, they're also there for any emergency concern that might come up. So it's critical that motor persons not move the train until they're sure that all of those calls have been taken and addressed. So certainly it's not to say that there could not be a scenario at some point where that protocol was not happened, but generally we should assume that those will be honored. If you or anyone experiences something different than that, that's absolutely something we'd want to know right away, because that's a pretty serious breach of an important safety protocol. Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Jerry. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Go ahead, Colleen.
I just wanted to ask, because we have to use bridge plates, unfortunately, right now under the circumstances, which I personally hate. They're locked for security reasons, but more than once, when I finally found an employee, they didn't have the key, or they had to find a colleague for the key. Is there any considerations for people who are dependent upon the bridge plates to somehow get their own key? Or I realize then we wouldn't be able to physically actually use these heavy things, but is there any way we can consider more how to put the control into the riders with disabilities hands?
So I don't think we've ever had this specific request come up. It's something certainly we can take back and discuss. I think I will say my initial reaction will be that, at least with the current setup, that's not a viable solution, because the key that unlocks the bridge plate is a key that is termed the P key at the MBTA, and it essentially is a key that is a universal key that unlocks a number of different things across the system, some of which might not be appropriate for riders to have access to. But that's absolutely something we can talk about internally. I think the bigger concern is why we would have a situation where an employee did not have their P key, because again, these keys are critical to a number of different important features. All of our transit ambassadors, station officials, and motor persons are required to have that key with them at all times. So it's, again, I certainly believe that happens, but that should not be happening, and that is something we need to really focus on. I'm hearing that. But Colleen, yep, we will follow up to think about is there a way to to provide some of these tools directly to riders.
Thanks, Laura. Great question, Colleen. Tara.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tara Maddie Doucette. I'm the attorney for the named plaintiffs in the Daniels Feingold class action. And I would strongly speak out on behalf of the named plaintiffs and state that I don't think, Colleen, anyone should have a key. And I'll tell you why. At the start of this lawsuit, when GAPS was an issue, and actually when lifts were an issue, that burden kind of shifted to riders. And I'll tell you what I mean, meaning that in order to use the lifts, bus drivers would say, bus operators would tell riders, do you have the key? And that was an excuse for like not getting people to board. And it was an awful, awful thing. And we documented, we have 100 plus affidavits from people. So we do not encourage that. The burden stays with the MBTA, with the system-wide accessibility for training and all of that. And it should not be shifted to the riders of the system. Everyone should be able to ride safely, securely, just as everybody else using the system, and no burdens should be shifted to the customers. Thanks.
Thank you, Tara. Does anybody else have any final questions or comments for SWA? All right, we can move on to the next slide. So thank you everyone so much for attending. Our next RTAG General Membership meeting is going to be Thursday, December 14th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And we will drop the link in the chat to sign up for our monthly RTAG newsletters. Thank you again, everyone, for coming, and we hope to see you next time. And if you would like to follow up, Jen just dropped my cell phone information and email information in the chat as well. I look forward to hearing from you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cal. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, SWA. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good
you all.
night.
Thank you. Bye.